Right, gentlemen, today we are moving on to the second last process of risk management, and that is implement risk responses. Yesterday, we developed the risk responses, and you have seen that how carefully we selected the risks from qualitative and quantitative analysis. And then, while we were developing the responses, we were very calculative. We were very, we were taking care of all the possible strategies, and then we were doing the cost benefit analysis. We were, you know, uh, finding all the various alternatives which are possible, and you know, all the all the responses we have developed, all the responses we have planned, we had been extra careful and calculative, as if we can make maximum benefit out of the minimum effort. That is what we need to do for efficiency. So we are not only being effective, we are being efficient, intelligent, careful planning, as if we can put money, least amount of money in response to whatever action is to be taken, and we want to take maximum advantage. We even did not waste money in developing responses which beforehand we established the responses in a way that those responses which were to be implemented uh, as late as possible, as if we can still be effective. So we did not spend a lot of money right in the beginning of the project. We did some of the responses were taken much earlier, but that they were spread over the whole period from identification till the occurrence of the risk. As I said, when the risk occurs, whatever you action take actions after that, they are not covered in risk management. They are issue management. So whatever we are doing the mitigation till that time, that must have been reducing the risk up to some extent. So we have planned them very carefully. But when we are doing it in execution, execution is altogether a different story. In execution, we don't know what is going to be happening to us. So in execution, we learn a lot many things. We will be implementing whatever responses we have created in the planning, but actually it all depends upon how the situation turns out to be. There are two things which are going to happen. Number one, new risks might occur, and we have to be watchful about them. Actually, the implementation or the execution and monitoring and control both are happening simultaneously. So, uh, the person who was made the risk action owner, or for that matter, the risk owner also, they are made responsible for keep an eye on the risks which we have already created the responses. So they are responsible for watching out for those risks. And they have also been identified at what specific moment they should be taking the action. So the alternative plans have been created and they have been placed, duly approved at some place, and they are to be only invoked if that certain criteria or certain condition occurs. So they are to be watchful about those conditions. This is the duty of the people who are implementing the risk response. Everybody has their own responsibility. As I said, we want to transfer the responsibility to the lowest level. The risk action owner or action taker is the person who is being watchful. Now, who is that person? We have already discussed about it. Who is the risk owner? Who is the risk action owner? Which we had identified right from the identification of the risk. These are not some special people. They are not people specially assigned for these jobs. They are actually the people, the member of the team which is working on the execution of the project. So if I have got, say, I'm construction a wall, this work package, I have got a person who is responsible for this work package. Naturally, for every work package, there is somebody responsible. So if a risk occurs in any activity of work package of the wall construction, naturally the person who would be held responsible will be the supervisor of construction of the wall. So the ownership will generally be given to the supervisor. So this supervisor will answer for the risk. He will answer for what action was taken when this risk occurred, and all the information about the risk has been shared with him. Not only shared with him, but he had been participant right from the beginning, when even when the risk was identified, processed, and till the response was created. And now is the time when the implementation is taking place, and during the execution, he, along with his subordinate, I don't mean all the people who are working on that job, but some of the people who are working on that job may have been assigned as risk action owners or action takers. Say on this wall construction project, on this wall construction work package, there were 10 people involved, but there might be two people assigned to him for a certain risk and another one person assigned to him for another risk, so that those specific actions are to be taken by those people. And it is very much possible that a person who has been assigned to him for one risk has also been assigned, the same person may also have been assigned for another risk. Moreover, we also understand that it is not necessary that for every risk he would be having a risk action owner. There might be a risk in which he himself had to take certain action and he does not have any team member involved with that. So he would be himself taking care of that. But in case there are risk action owners, those risk action owners would be responsible for specific actions they would be taking as soon as the trigger for that risk is invoked. So these action owners will intimate the risk owner. Naturally, he will also be watchful of it, and they would know. And naturally, he will authorize them to start the work, and he will also inform the project manager that a trigger has been invoked for that risk. When I say trigger, that does not mean the risk has occurred. That means a certain condition has occurred which has indicated that this risk has reached that stage. That does not exactly mean that it has occurred. It might be this is about to occur. This is, say, 20 minutes before occurrence or something like that. So when we find that indication, we start our action. And those actions we take before the risk occurs result in reduction of the risk in form of reduction of probability, or for that matter reduction of the threat, ultimately impacting the exposure of that risk. That is from the negative point of view, and in positive point of view it will be vice versa. So this is what are the responsibilities of these people. And while these guys are working on the those implementation of those specific risk responses, the monitoring and control people are being watchful of all what is happening. They are monitoring everything, and at the same time, with the changing circumstances and with the occurrence of the risks or the activation of the triggers, they are watching for new risks, analyzing for new qualitative and quantitative analysis, and keep adding to the risk responses and all this data. So these things are happening together: implement risk responses and monitor risk. So let us see what is happening in implement risk responses. I have just given you a summary for that. Implement risk responses is the process of implementing agreed upon risk response plans, and the key benefit of this process is that it ensures that agreed upon risk responses are executed as planned in order to address overall project risk exposure, minimize individual project threats, and maximize individual project opportunities. And that was our mission from the right from the beginning. We wanted to create that kind of environment where we could either reduce the individual project risk threats, project threats, or maximize the opportunities. This process is performed throughout the project. So this is going to be happening throughout, and the inputs, tools, and techniques are to be like this. So what we need is a project management plan. Naturally, that is the risk management plan we are interested in, and project documents. We will be getting the lessons learned register, Risk register and risk report, naturally risk register and risk report are extremely important because they hold all the data about what are the risks and what is to be done with them. Organizational process assets, we would refer to the organization process assets for that purpose. The expert judgment will be using naturally in this specific area or implementation of risk responses. Naturally, we will also require the interpersonal and team skills like influencing. We influence the people who are involved with it. And the most important is the usage of project management information system, which is an automated tool for information management where we have to keep the record. Naturally, the knowledge management being done by integration would be associated with project management information system, but this system is basically a device or a tool through which I convey this information to various databases, and those databases are then kept in the knowledge base. The outputs are if something is requiring a change request, maybe because the specific actions we need to take in implementation of risk response, they are not already duly approved and they need some change. Then we will have the change request, and project documents will ultimately be updated. Like if a risk has occurred, issue log will be populated, the lesson learned register will be updated. Team assignments may change. The person who was earlier assigned as risk owner may have changed, so a new that team assignment or addition or subtraction to that might be recorded, and naturally the risk register and risk report we have taken as input can now be updated as well. From data flow diagram point of view, we are getting the risk management plan from the project management plan. We are getting the lessons learned, risk report, and a risk register from the project documents, and organizational process assets are being taken from the organization. Again, you will notice there are no enterprise environmental factors when we are implementing the risk responses. And we had also observed, and they were not there in the previous process as well. Now, while we are implementing the risk responses, uh, we are giving the output as two outputs. One is the change request, which will be updated into that would be sent to perform integrated change control. And perform integrated change control, as you know and understand, all the change requests are sent to that process, and that is responsible for executing or approving those change requests through the change control board. Um, the other thing we are having is the project document updates, and they are naturally the lessons learned register, issue log, team assignment, risk report, and risk register. All that is going to be updated into the project documents. So as we know already about a lot many tools we are using, so let us only talk about those which are new to us. So here we have the variance and trend analysis. So variance and trend analysis we had already been carrying out in all the control processes. So what do we do there? So we will be watchful of that, and we would be exercising that. Many control processes employ variance analysis to compare the planned results to the actual results. For the purposes of controlling risk, trends in project execution should be reviewed using performance information. Earned value analysis and other methods of project variance and trend analysis may be used for controlling overall project performance. Outcomes from these analyses may forecast potential deviation of a project at completion that cost and schedule targets. Deviation from the baseline plan may indicate the potential impact of threat or opportunity. So we are very well aware of what these variances and trend analysis are. We compare the results between the two, and ultimately whatever is the variance in positive or negative direction, that variance is analyzed and seen if it is crossing the boundary of the scope, time, and cost baseline. The thresholds, are they within the threshold? If they are within the threshold or whatever is the analysis, I will note it down into the work performance information. And actually, if there any trend analysis is created and we see that The variances so far have established a trend which shows that the variance is going to increase or decrease in the future. So this will also help us in creating the forecast. So variance and trend analysis is one of the analysis here we may take care of, because they are basically variance and trend analysis are happening by various controls in the monitoring and control. So we can take advantage of that. Technical performance measurement can also be helpful to us. Compares the technical accomplishment during the project execution to the schedule of technical achievement. It requires the definition of objective, quantifiable measures of technical performance, which can be used to compare actual results against targets. Again, those things are being indicative. Such technical performance measures may include weight, transition times, number of delivered defects, storage capacity, etc. Deviations such as demonstrating more or less functionality than planned at a milestone can help to forecast the degree of success in achieving the project scope. Then we have the change request, and as we all understand what a change request really means, implementing the contingency plans or workarounds sometimes result in a change request. Change requests are prepared and submitted to the perform integrated change control process. So we have to go through the change request if there is a change in our contingency plan or if there is a workaround in case of. And where do we have the workarounds? Although I said that workaround is something which happens when the risk has occurred. So that is coming not in that area of risk management, that is coming in the area of issue management, but still workarounds are there and they have to be properly, change request has to be carried out. So I can at least move the change request for those amendments in the contingencies are the workarounds. uh, as a result, we will have two kind of actions coming out of it. One are the recommended corrective actions and the recommended preventive actions. Corrective actions, these are activities that realign the performance of the project work with the project management plan. So this is the correction which is bringing us back on track. That means due to the variance occurring, we have diversified, we have gone out of the track, we have varied from the track, and now wherever we are standing and where we should have been, there is a difference in between that, and that corrective action is specifically required to bring us back on the original track. So this could be the corrective action which is suggested, and if this is beyond the limit of the threshold of the scope, time, and cost, we need to have a change request to approve that. They include contingency plans and workarounds. The latter are responses that were not initially planned but are required to deal with emerging risks that were previously unidentified or accepted passively. Then we have the recommended preventive actions. These are activities that ensure the future performance of project work is aligned with the project management plan. So the damage has yet not occurred. We have not diversified, but we can clearly see that these preventive actions are to be taken as if we do not get lost in future. Now, what we have done is, you know that this implement risk responses is a new process added in 6th edition of the PMBOK. It was not there earlier, and now the responsibilities we used to have in monitoring and control, as far as risk is concerned, have been split in two parts. One part is the implementation of the risk responses which have been taken care in execution and which I have just defined to you, and the other part is the monitoring of the risk, which we will be discussing more in the subsequent process. But ultimately, they are very closely associated and they impact each other. That's why we are having these change requests and all that. So this is very short. We have concluded the implement risk responses. There was not much in it, but still, as I said, this is just a bifurcation of a earlier control risk process, monitor and control risk process, and now we have segregated the portion which had to be taking care of keeping a watch on all the risks which are to occur, and the team is responsible for doing that. This job we have given to the implement risk responses, and that will actually be responsible for executing those responses if those triggers or sensor conditions do occur. And monitor risk will be uh, naturally it is the postmortem, whatever had happened. So actually the risks will occur here. In monitor risk, we will see the risks happening. Whatever action we had to take, we had taken so far till the implementation of risk responses. But now we don't have anything to do in monitor risk except for watching and making changes to the whole risk process for any further action. So before I can start describing the monitor risk, if there are any questions, I would invite you to ask your questions. Meanwhile, I welcome Shahid Saab, which is back. I think he got back quite after we started, immediately after. And Ji Shahid Saab, how are you?
जी सर ठीक ठाक अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह।
Okay, we are at the fag end of this course, and I hope you have caught up with the previous lecture.
जी सर,
Okay, wonderful,
तो
wonderful.
एक वीडियो देखी मैंने।
Okay, and I think one was loaded to just a few moments earlier. You can see that also, and this one is also going to be available. We have got
जी सर, ओके।
another user, Kamran Ashraf. Kamran Ashraf, sahab, how are you? I don't know what his mic is not switching on. Kamran Ashraf, please can you write in the chat window?
It appears that if he's like offline.
Kind of. Okay, fine. Right. So getting back, this is our last process in project risk management, and here we are responsible for the monitoring of the risk. And monitor risk is a very deliberate process because this is going to do the postmortem of the whole process of risk management. We will uh, be changing our plans here. We will be re-evaluating everything what we have done. We will be finding new risks. This is a continuous process. Like all the processes of risk management, right from identification till monitor risk, these all are repetitive in nature. They will keep happening till the project ends. And monitor risk has such a huge responsibility that all the work which was carried out in right from identification of risk till the implementation, it will have to redesign everything for all future risks. So it is going to be actually conducting all of those activities during the monitor risk. So here our purpose is to monitor and control the planned responses. We have already done the planned responses thing and keep an eye on any new risk. That keep an eye on any new risk is our specific objective of monitor risk. So what is the purpose and objective of monitor risk process? What are the critical success factors? What are the tools and techniques? And documenting the results of monitor and risk process. This is what we are going to be talking about. The purpose and objective is effectiveness of the project risk management depends upon the way approved plans are carried out. So whatever is being carried out effectively, we have done it, implement risk responses. Effectiveness part was there, but it is keeping an eye on whatever has happened, and it is evaluating the whole situation. These plans should be executed correctly, reviewed, and updated regularly. So it is responsible for reviewing everything what has happened. If this is carried out correctly, the invested effort will be rewarded, and future projects will benefit from this project's experience. Naturally, we are going to submit these experiences ultimately into the organizational process asset for guidance of all future projects. So we are leaving a lot of lessons learned also. The primary objective of risk monitoring and controlling are to track identified risks, residual risks, identify new risks, ensure that risk response plans are executed at the appropriate time, and that was the responsibility of implementing the risk responses. But who is doing the postmortem of the risk responses? This is the responsibility of monitor risk. And evaluate their effectiveness throughout the project life cycle. You see, the interesting part is if there was something wrong with the original risk management plan, even that can be challenged here, and even the risk management plan can be amended during the monitor risk, and ultimately all subsequent work would be rehashed according to the amended risk management plan, and that may tend amount to rehashing the strategy, the risk strategy. So that is the heart and soul of the risk management plan. So if you feel at some stage that your risk strategy is not reaping the desired results, and it might have been wrong, or your thresholds you have established were not really very workable, then you can amend them. So this is what the monitor risk will be doing. In addition to tracking and managing the risk responses, the effectiveness of all of the project risk management processes, as I said, all of them should be reviewed. It is responsible to review by risk and qualitative analysis, quantitative analysis, risk response development, risk response implementation, all of that. It is going to review that, and they will be reviewed to provide improvements to the management of the current project, and as well as to the future ones in shape of organizational process assets. So it has a huge responsibility. So monitor risk is some important process. For each risk or set of risks for which a contingent response has been defined, the corresponding set of trigger conditions should have been specified. So while we are doing the postmortem, we can always comment that the trigger conditions defined or the sensors defined were not really effective, or they were effective, and what are we learning lessons out of it, and what should we be leaving as lessons learned for others. Or if we can fix something which for future remaining work of this project also, that could also be used. This lesson learned can also be used for that. We can submit this into the knowledge base of this project, which could be useful for further risks we are going to be identifying in this project. It is the responsibility of the action owner, risk action owner, to ensure that these conditions are effectively monitored and that the corresponding actions are carried out as defined in a timely manner. And this was happening where? In the implement risk responses. And why are we concerned about it here? Because we are monitoring how the implementation of risk responses were carried out, and we are gathering any lessons learned out of it, or even if there was a correction applied for any future work, that could also be done here. Once the planned risk responses process is complete, all of the approved unconditional response actions should have been included and defined in the current project management plan. So wherever the requisite changes are to be made in the project management plan, after the responses have been identified, they should have been made. And if there was something which was not integrated, and this is now identified that it was not properly integrated into the schedule or cost or something, so that is a lesson learned, and that should be uh, used for the remaining project and the future project. First action of risk monitoring and controlling is to check whether this is the case and take any appropriate action if necessary, such as invoking the change management process with respect to any missing actions, that is, moving the change request. So the biggest tool this process has of moving the change request. This will ensure that the agreed upon actions are carried out within the normal project execution framework. Risk owners and risk action owners need to be briefed on any changes that may affect their responsibilities. If during the monitoring of the risk we find there is something, some changes in changes which have been brought due to the monitor risk, and for some risk which has yet not occurred, and we may have to send back some certain instructions to the risk owners and risk action owners who are already working simultaneously in the implement risk responses, so they can also take advantage of the lessons we are learning from here. Effective communication needs to be maintained between them and the project manager. So, as I said before, whatever is happening, the whole chain of command should be active. Risk owner, action owner, when identifies that a certain sensor has activated a trigger should inform the risk owner, and risk owner should inform the project manager or the risk manager, so that the designated stakeholders accept accountability for controlling the potential outcomes of the specific risk. It should be transparently known to all the relevant stakeholders, and they should be ready for that when that trigger activates. Apply their best effort to track the associated trigger conditions. So whomsoever is responsible for taking certain actions, maybe some stakeholder is responsible for releasing the money or doing something. So they whatever action they had to take, they should be ready for that and carry out the agreed upon responses in a timely manner. So I am facilitating them to do that from monitor risk while it is happening in implement risk responses in execution. In addition to the response actions and trigger conditions, a mechanism for measuring the effectiveness of the response is provided by the plan risk response process. The risk action owner should keep the risk owner aware of the status of the response actions so that the risk owner can decide when the risk have been effectively dealt with or whether additional actions need to be planned or implemented. You see, this is exactly what I was saying in implement risk response. Action owner should inform risk owner as soon as the sensor is triggered. Sensor or trigger condition has occurred of the this response action, and naturally risk owner will do certain action, and he will also inform the project manager or the risk manager. So what risk owner will decide? He will decide when the risk has been effectively dealt with. Whatever the actions have been told to the risk action owners, they have taken those actions or not, and how soon and when the action has been taken, or whether any additional actions are may be required or not. And if that, then that has to be probably that they did not have the plan for that. So any additional actions, they may have to move the change request, and that's why in implement risk responses we had a process for requesting the change. As the project progresses, additional information becomes available. That is specifically the role of monitor risk, that it will identify new risks, and the management environment may change also as some risks occur, whether foreseen or unforeseen, and others become or cease to be relevant. Now, you have to watch both of the things. There are certain risks which do not occur. So, the triggers and sensors you have invoked for them, activated for them, may be put off because those resources spent on the sensors or triggers, they are they are actually consuming your time and cost and effort. So, those risks which are no more, whether they have occurred or they did not occur, if they are no more, then all such resources which are actually looking after the sensors and triggers should be put off. Moreover, if the risk has occurred, same thing, we should put off those risk sensors and risk triggers. For example, if there is a possibility of rain which can affect some activity of my project, so how do I know that rain is about to come? So maybe I am relying on the weather forecast. So I am continuously coordinating with the weather forecasting agency on online, or maybe through website or what, and I have uh, made it a responsibility of someone to keep checking it. The risk which had to happen did not happen, but the trigger and sensor is still working. The person who has been assigned for looking for the weather is still looking for the weather, but that risk uh, has not occurred and the time has passed. Why are we checking the weather time and again? Why are we wasting resources in communicating with the weather agency when this risk matters to us no more? Therefore, that risk has to be deactivated. I mean that sensor or trigger has to be deactivated, thus saving useful resources for our organization. The planning should therefore be kept current, and the project manager should ensure that periodic risk assessment, reassessment, including risk identification, analysis, qualitative, quantitative, and response planning, is repeated at reasonable intervals or in response to certain project events without generating excess administrative overhead. That was our basic formula, that we wanted to be highly economical and efficient. We don't want to do activities unnecessarily. So, in response to project events, also, sometimes we do not take actions continuously. We just sit down and be watchful and wait for certain conditions to occur, and then we start acting. So, we do not want to cause uh, excessive administrative overhead. Risks are very dangerous, even if they do not occur, but they waste a lot of our energy and effort if we do not use our energy and effort intelligently. Typical reasons for reassessment of the risk are occurrence of major or unexpected risk. Whenever any risk occurs, we should reevaluate our whole situation and see if this occurrence has caused some residual risks or some secondary risks or some new risks have been identified. Need for analysis complex change request. Whenever there is a change request which has been approved, that definitely tantamounts to some changes in the project. Therefore, we may have to reassess our situation as far as risks are concerned once again. Whenever a phase ends, the phase end review also should be an indicator that we should conduct our risk reassessment. Then project replanning or major plan, and whenever there is progressive elaboration, whenever we are adding something to the plan due to any reason, that is the time we should also again do the risk reassessment. And naturally, we have planned for a periodic review, maybe on a fortnightly basis or a weekly basis, whatever, which we have been discussing earlier as well. So this periodic review is to ensure that the information remains current all the time. So this is not only the periodic review which matters, it also matters that what are the instantaneous measures you take throughout the life of the project when you have the threat of having new things entering into your project. So you must immediately reassess your environment and situation and keep your risk management plan current. In the event of major organizational changes, risk management planning may need to be revisited prior to reassessing the risks. In addition to the regular status reviews, periodic audits should be performed to determine strengths and weaknesses in handling risks within a project. You see, uh, we do not, when in identification we have studied, we do not bar from identifying a risk anytime in addition to all these specific events which I've just discussed. A risk, whenever someone feels that this is going to be a risk, we immediately will identify and we will immediately do the reassessment at any point in time in the project. This is uh, this is an open offer that reassessment is a continuous effort also. This entail identifying any barriers to effectiveness are keys to success in risk management, recognition of which could lead to improvement in risk management of the current or future projects. Even when we find that effectiveness of our risk management plan is not to the level which we desired, we can review even the risk strategy and the risk management plan anytime and revise that, and accordingly we can rehash all the risks we have so far identified. And naturally, at the end of the project, we will have to gather some lessons learned out of it. An integrated analysis of risk management process should be carried out with a focus on long-term process improvements. This analysis consolidates the findings of the periodic audits to identify lessons that would be applicable in general to a large proportion of the organization's projects in the future, such as appropriate levels of resources, adequate time for the analysis, use of various tools, level of detail in which we need to go for these risks. And naturally, one instance could be when we are closing down the project. That is the last instance where the risk registers will be sealed. They will be, data will be put into them and they will be sealed, and that now from now onwards, this is going to be for the future project. Lessons learned we are leaving are for the future projects. The project manager should ensure that a description has been given to the closure of every risk register. The risk register is going to be closed now, and we should write comments at the end of every entry of the risk register, whether this risk did occur or did not occur. If it occurred, what did we do about it? What was the contingency plan we invoked? Or if it is occurred, and impact of the what was the impact on the project scope, time, cost, quality, etc., on the project objectives. So this all has to be recorded in the risk register, and this is going to be a useful lessons learned from this project for all future projects. The output of the audit of the risk management process should be consolidated with specific information with respect to the project's experience of risks and any generally applicable guidelines for the organization should be highlighted and potential actions proposed for applying them. This can lead to an update to the corresponding organizational process assets, which we are just talking about. So from the standard of project risk management, first edition, this is a very interesting diagram for risk response monitoring. This is an overview of the steps involved in the monitoring and control of risk. And it says we have the project management plan, and risk register is also developed during the project management planning. So we invoke the risk response monitoring according to the project management plan, and we review the progress reports for status reviews and audits. And from there, we may have additional risk information coming, or major project events coming, or trigger conditions occurring, and as a response to that, risk response control mechanism will be invoked. And the risk register will also feed into the risk response control. And what does it do? In activation to that additional risk information or major project events or trigger conditions, it will invoke the relevant contingency plans and perform additional risk identification, analysis, and risk response. So as far as the first part is concerned, which is in invoking the contingency plan, this is the responsibility of implement risk responses. And as far as the performance of additional risk identification and all that is the responsibility of monitor risk. And ultimately, if there is a change request, and both of these cases, the change request would be sent to integrated change control, and any updates in project management plan or risk registers will be updated in project management plan or the project documents. And ultimately, whatever the result of risk monitoring or of control, they are communicated to the relevant stakeholders, and lessons learned are recorded for this project as well as for the future projects. So, monitor risk from PMBOK 6th edition says it is the process of monitoring the implementation of agreed upon risk response plans, tracking identified risks, identifying and analyzing new risks, and evaluating risk process effectiveness throughout the project. When we say risk process effectiveness, that means we are looking surgically at the risk management plan and risk strategy and the risk thresholds, and if we need to even change them, we can change them. The key benefit of this process is that it enables project decisions to be based on current information about overall project risk exposure and individual project risks. So this process is also performed throughout the project. So the inputs, tools and techniques and the outputs for monitor risks are the same like project management plan, and out of that we are the important document is a risk management plan. Project documents, we take care of the issue logs here, lesson learned register, risk register, and risk report. And the important thing is we get the work performance data, because where we are in monitoring and control. And in monitoring and control, all the monitors and all the controls will receive the work performance data and the project management plan, and they will do the analysis. The comparison will be done between the work performance data and the project management plan, and variances will be found. And then we will do the trend analysis. We will do all that analysis, and naturally here it is written in data analysis, technical performance analysis, and reserve analysis. That would also be done, and ultimately we will yield the work performance information in output. Now, once this work performance information is submitted to monitor and control project work, and monitor and control project work uh, consolidates our performance report, that report comes back to monitor risk. You can see the fourth input, work performance report. So work performance report is the consolidated report coming from the mm, monitor and control project work from integration. So the interestingly, monitor risk is one process which is benefiting from the work performance data from the basic analysis point of view, and the ultimate result of the processing of work performance information and creation of a work performance report is also being input to it for further purposes of audit and meeting. So audits are carried out, data analysis is carried out, and as a result, we have the work performance information going out of it. And if there is any change, change request is also a possibility here. But all we are going to be updating, we could be updating any component of the project management plan. We get as an input risk management plan, but we have, in respect to the change request we are carrying out, that change request may impact any of the project management plan ingredients or components. It could affect the scope management plan, schedule management plan, cost management. Any of the ingredients could have been updated because we are even opening the floodgates of changing the risk management plan that could affect everything and every component of the project management plan. What else can be updated due to that? Project documents could be updated. Assumption logs. Naturally, we are at the fag end, so new assumptions might have come and they may have to be updated. Issue logs, those risks which have occurred, they may have entered into the issue log. Lesson learned register, risk register, and risk report, and ultimately, organizational process assets are updated. You will notice one thing, that there is nothing coming from organization side, no enterprise environmental factors and no organizational process assets. This is one of the very few processes, or maybe the only process, which does not get any of those as input. So this is an exception. But at the same time, you don't really need to remember that. Generally, if you can take note of this thing, that is good enough. But otherwise, this is, I just highlighted it, that in monitor risk, you do not have any one of those two inputs, but still you are updating organizational process assets from this process. So the data flow diagram can clearly show you that in inputs we are getting the risk management plan from the project management plan, we are getting the issue log, lesson learned register, and risk report from the project document. We are getting the work performance data from execution, the direct and managed project work, and monitor and control project work is giving us the performance report. So this is one of those processes which is getting both of these things, work performance data as well as work performance reports. Now, what is it? Is it producing? It is producing the work performance information which is going to monitor and control project work. It is producing the change request going to perform integrated change control. It is updating any component of the project management plan. It is updating project documents like assumption log, issue log, lesson learned register, and risk report. And ultimately, it is updating the organizational process assets in the organization. So this is it. Now, in order to ensure that the project team and key stakeholders are aware of the current level of project exposure, project work should be continuously monitored for new, changing, and outdated individual project risks, and for changes in the level of overall project risk by applying the monitor risk process. As I said before, there might be a possibility that the risk threshold set earlier has changed. So if the risk threshold has reduced, then the whole dynamics of our identification has changed, and now there were a lot many things which we did not consider as risks are now becoming the risk. Therefore, new process of identification has to be carried out in monitor risk, and in this identification will catapult the analysis process, and naturally the new responses will be built, and the whole thing will be rehashed. The monitor risk process uses performance information generated from during project execution to determine if implemented risk responses are effective, level of overall project risk has changed or not, status of identified individual risks project risk has changed or not. New individual project risks have arisen. Risk management approach is still appropriate or not. Project assumptions are still valid, because if assumptions change again, my risks will be affected by that. Risk management policies and procedures are being followed. We should not be diversifying from that without any particular reason. We have to have a change request if at all we need to diversify from any policy or procedure. We have to have the permission for that. Contingency reserves for cost or schedule require modification. That has to be done through a change request. Project strategy, is it still valid? If it is not valid, then probably we have to shake up everything and rehash a new plan. In data analysis, we have the technical performance analysis and reserve analysis. In technical performance analysis, it compares the technical accomplishment during project execution to the schedule of technical achievements. Is it happening as it should? It requires the definition of objective, quantifiable measures of technical performance. How do you know that this has been measured? So technical performances should have been defined earlier along with its measurableness. They should have the measures should have been decided beforehand, and now I am measuring them, which can be used to compare actual results against targets. Such technical performance measures may include the weight, transaction times, number of delivered defects, storage capacity, etc. Deviation can indicate the potential impact of threats or opportunities. Reserve analysis, as we have been studying about it throughout. So throughout execution of the project, some individual project risks may occur with positive or negative impact on budget or schedule contingency reserves. Reserve analysis compares the amount of contingency reserves remaining to the amount of risk remaining at any time in the project in order to determine if the remaining reserve is adequate. If not adequate, change request has to be moved, as if we can comfortably move on with the remaining part of the project. This may be communicated using various graphical representations, including a burn-down chart in case of agile. So these different kinds of analysis could be carried out. So what are the critical success factors for monitoring the risk? There are three. Number one, integrating the risk monitoring and control with project monitoring and control. This is closely associated with each other. Then continuously monitoring the risk trigger conditions and maintaining risk awareness to all the stakeholders. As far as integrating the risk monitoring and controlling and project monitoring and control is, from the start, project management plan should include the actions required to monitor and control project risk. This should be set up early in the project planning cycle and then adjusted in view of the risk response planning decisions, adding, for example, the actions associated with monitoring specific conditions or metrics. Once risk response planning has been carried out, the project schedule should include all of the agreed upon response related actions so that they can be carried out as a normal part of project execution and tracked accordingly. This I am speaking from the practice standard for project risk management. Then is continuously monitoring the risk trigger conditions. Risk response planning will have defined a set of conditions to be carried out as part of the project schedule. So I have included that thing into the project schedule. What triggers have to be done and monitored, what actions have to be taken, they are also part of the schedule. Actions whose execution is dependent on a predefined trigger condition. Checking for specifically defined risks that may trigger conditional responses is the responsibility of risk action owner, in close collaboration with the risk owner under the overall authority of the project manager. So this nexus has to be there. Risk action owner, this thing has happened in implement risk response. Risk action owner was responsible, informing and collaborating with the risk owner, and ultimately under the overall authority of the project manager, they will be looking after the implementation of risk responses. Then is the maintain risk awareness. Risk management reports should be a registered item on every status meeting agenda to ensure that all team members remain aware of the importance of risk management and to ensure that is fully integrated into all of the project management decisions. The project senior level sponsors should require regular reports on the risk and the planned responses to ensure that the stakeholders are aware of the importance of keeping a focus on risk. As I said, the responsibility, the ultimate responsibility of risk management is with the senior level management. So they should have personal interest into the thing, and they should be having in their usual reports about the risk also. Sponsor feedback also motivates the project team by demonstrating senior level interest in project risk management. If sponsors and senior level people are interested in asking about the risk management, people will be on their toes. Stakeholder perception of the effectiveness of risk management is conditioned in part by the way in which risks are handled as they occur and by the number of characteristics of such events. It is therefore crucial whenever a risk occurs that information about the event as well as the progress and effectiveness of the responses be communicated at regular intervals and in an honest manner adapted to the needs of each stakeholder. Just note, it says adapted to the needs of stakeholders. You don't need to provide them raw information. Whatever affects them should be told to them. This should be supported by a well-executed communication plan, and therefore stakeholder management and communication management, they all will come into play in integration with the risk management. So what are the specific tools and techniques in monitoring risk? In addition to standard project management monitoring and control capabilities, risk monitoring and controlling requires a focus on tools which will support its key success factors, which I have described earlier, for tracking overall risk as well as the individual risk. So we have one thing as managing contingency reserves. We have to very intelligently manage these contingency reserves as if they are not wasted unnecessarily. Tracking trigger conditions, tracking overall risk, and tracking compliance. These are the various ways we can be very effective in our monitoring risk process. As far as contingency reserves are concerned, reserves may have been allocated separately to cover time-related and cost-related risks. Techniques are required that allow the project manager to assess at any point in the project whether these provide the required level of confidence in the success of the project or not. Tools for managing time buffers should be closely integrated into the project's scheduling technique. I hope you understand what are the time buffers and how do we, protect our project through time buffers. If you have, you know about it, please let me know. What is a time buffer? Yes, please.
So time buffer is like an uh, extra amount of time you pad between your estimates. Uh, Means there is some extra time always there in the estimate that you may call it a slack period, or in the schedule, yeah, that is slack, or a buffer where you do not have an activity to fill in.
Mm,
But if an activity exceeds that the allocated time, so this buffer could be utilized.
okay.
So
Shahid Saab, what is your opinion? What is a buffer? Shahid Saab. Khayyam?
So, sir, a buffer would be some. So, should I explain from the critical chain or generic definition?
Now, what is in generic definition if it is not critical chain? Buffer is all
क्योंकि
about
हम
critical
वही
chain.
मेरे ध्यान में वर्सल में वो थोड़ा confusion थी. I think ये तो in critical chain you keep buffers for time, basically to ensure that you have some leverage if
Mhm.
any activity becomes critical at a later stage. Then you utilize that
So it
buffer.
is saying the same thing. Tools for managing time buffers. So this is critical
Yes.
chain he is talking about.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Okay,
So
I'll
there
talk
are
about it.
multiple paths, sir,
Hmm.
in the critical chain. So the critical path is the path for the completion of the project, but
Hmm.
on the other path, if you have some time left there, so
Hmm.
the slack period buffer, so there are like these are the common terminologies for that.
Hmm.
Means the time available to the project in the other paths other than the critical path.
Hmm.
So they are the time buffers.
Okay. Okay. Okay, we'll talk about more about it, but I feel and I understand that except for you, Khayyam, who have some idea about these buffers, Mueed and Shahid Saab probably do not understand what the buffers are. And I must at least tell you, buffers are not extra time.
Yes, sir.
Buffers are not float. They are not slack. So float, slack, these are all terms for the extra time available. This is not the extra time. Actually, Mohit, have you studied about the critical chain method?
Yes, sir.
Okay, this is about the critical chain. In critical chain, I say that I have to save my critical path. My critical path is 40 days. I do not want to exceed any more than 40 days. I want to complete my project in 40 days. But what happens is my activities will definitely and always, some activities will get delayed on the critical path and my critical path will slip. It will expand more than 40 days. How I protect it, that is the critical chain method. So what I do is that I build in certain defense mechanism without adding external time. It remains 40 days, but within the 40 days, I keep certain time buffers which will protect me in against the delays coming from the activities. And how can I do that? I can start taxing the activities, the critical activities, and giving them less time than planned. You understand me? So I will borrow, say, 1 day from one activity, 2 days from another activity, another 1 day from another activity. But these are all from the critical activities. So whatever I am borrowing from them, I am keeping it at the end of the project in the project buffer. This project buffer is basically my security. Now, those activities would know that this is no more their time. This time has been snatched from them, and this has now become the project property, and they will now try to shrink their work within whatever time has been left with them. Now, why are we doing that, and why should we do that? You have to understand the nature of estimation. When we are estimating the time, cost, or resources, there's a usual tendency that the information travels from bottom up. So the person who actually has to do the job, I'll talk about the time buffer right now. The person who is actually responsible for doing the job, he is asked how much time will you take. Naturally, we do have some historical record as well, but that person thinks that this job can be done in 1 day, but he keeps some of his own margin into it, which is not exactly a contingency or reserve, but it is kind of a padding without any reason. When he keeps 1 day extra, that is the padding he is putting into the project. So he tells his supervisor that this job will take 2 days, I can do it in 2 days, whereas he knows that this job could be done in 1 day. So he added some padding, which is criminal, which is not right, but people do use padding. So he added some padding into it, and then his supervisor, when he was doing the estimate of all the activities, uh, he added his own pad, maybe another 1 day. So this activity became 3 days, and this way, when it reached project manager, it may have been inflated to 5 days. So you see, usually these activities are expanded many times when they reach the level of approval. So maybe I approve as a project manager this activity to be 5 days. Now 5 days have been given to the person who has to do this job, and he is now more than happy that he has got 5 days. So there is a tendency, Parkinson law says that work expands to fill the time available. work expands to fill the time available. So if you have been given 5 days, that this 1 day work will expand into 5 days, just like air in a balloon. So you will expand your work in 5 days, and then if somebody asks you to do it in 4 days, you say no, it is not possible because I have arranged it like that. It cannot be reduced. Although you know that initially that job was of 1 day, but you are not going to agree to anyone to reduce this to 4 days even. You are now stick with your 5 day estimate, and this 5 day is now going to be what you are doing. So even in these 5 days, because you knew this is a 1 day job, you are the person who is responsible for doing this job. When you start doing it, you will be relaxed in the beginning. Rather, you will not be doing anything in the beginning, and you will be procrastinating. You will be leaving everything for the end. This is called student syndrome, that if you have been given certain time to prepare for your exam, you will only prepare on the last night. So he will keep procrastinating, pushing the work forward till the last moment. That is the latest start. He's trying to do the latest start. So, and at the end of the day, when he's left with the last 1 day, he then starts working on it, and even then he gets delayed. And ultimately, that activity may not get completed in time. And if it is a critical activity, it is going to affect the critical part. So I'm only talking about the critical activities. These activities will definitely get late, and if they will get late, according to these two laws, the Parkinson law and the student syndrome, the every activity is likely to get late. Okay, and if it gets late, the burden will be put on the shoulder of the project manager. We don't know, please help us, give us more time. But he doesn't have more than 40 days. So how can he give you extra time? So we try to shift the burden. In case of anything bad happening, it always is on the shoulder of the project manager. What if something good happens? What if an activity which was the time given was 5 days and you were able to complete in 4 days? What will you do? Tell me. If your activity which was given 5 days and you completed in 4 days, what will you do with your 1 day extra?
Relax, sir.
Relax. You do not want to give the advantage back to the project manager. You are not of any use to the project manager because you are anyways consuming 5 days. You were given 5 days, you did it earlier, but you are not transferring the advantage to the project. And ultimately, project manager should not expect anything from you as far as time is concerned. And he should expect that all the delays will be given to him and the project will elongate, which we don't want. So buffer does not mean that in addition to these 40 days, I allocate certain time, say 4 or 5 days extra to that, not extra. This is going to be within these 40 days. I have to get those 4 or 5 days out of the critical path activities, and that I will retain in the critical in the project buffer at the end of critical path. So now what happens if I have confiscated 1 or 2 days each from every activity, and I have built up my own project buffer, and that is now within my domain as a project manager, and nobody has a right to take away this time. Then, as the Parkinson law says, work expands to fill the time available. The reverse will be true. The work will contract to fill the time available. Now the time available is less. So if I have taken away 1 day already, the person responsible will know that I have only 4 days, and he has to readjust to 4 days and plan accordingly. So he will do it. But again, as we know, he will definitely get late. So when he is getting late, he will be coming crying to me, and I already have 1 day confiscated from him. I am not going to give him back that 1 day, but I am going to say, okay, because I know that I have 1 day which I can give him back, but I will say, okay, I don't give you 1 day, I just give you 2 more hours to complete your job. So that way, we ensure that the work is completed within the 5 days actually allocated for that task. Even you still have the tendency to save some time out of every activity, and ultimately there is a high possibility that you will, if you are using critical chain method, you will be completing the project even sometime before the time. So that is something great. But we are only talking about the critical path. What about the other activities? What about the non-critical paths, non-critical activities? Non-critical activities also, there are some near critical activities which can become critical. They only have a float of 1 or 2 days. So what if they get delayed? By that time, they will also be taxing the project buffer. But remember, project buffer is not meant for those activities. Project buffer is not meant for those activities. Project buffer is meant for only what? Project buffer is meant for only the critical activities, because this time has been confiscated only from critical activities. So all other activities will be plainly refused. Project buffer cannot give you anything. Make your own arrangement. That is the key. Make your own arrangement. So those all those other non-critical paths will have to generate their own buffers for their own protection. These are called feeding buffers, right? So we have the project buffer, we have the feeding buffer, and sometimes where there is a resource constraint, where maybe a resource who gets free from one activity and goes to another activity after 2 days, he gets late in reaching the other activity. So we can also have a third kind of buffer, that we confiscate the 2 days given to him. In between, we confiscate 1 day out of it and ask him to be present 1 day earlier. That is called a resource buffer. So we have three kinds of time buffers: project buffer, feeding buffer, and the resource buffer. So these are the buffers which are not extra time at all. These are not float at all. These are the confiscated time from actual activities for the protection sake, and this is a great tool for risk management. I hope that makes the things clearer.
Yes, sir.
Shahid Sahab,
Yes.
are you there?
जी
This is
सर
a
मैं यहीं पे हूँ सर
this is a very important point. You must note it. And probably if you have, because I also teach scheduling and I elaborate it in a lot of detail, but here I have just summarized the whole thing. So probably you have to take note of that. And this has to be remembered. Buffers are not floats. Please never ever say that. Buffers are not floats. This is not extra time.
ओके
Sir, because of these terminologies are so used in the
Mm-hmm.
interchangeably in the means outside world or the project world.
Mm-hmm.
So like I just lost track of it, that there is a difference between Slack and a buffer.
You see, you should not say used. They are misused.
Exactly,
They are
exactly.
misused. So next
Yes,
time
sir.
you see anyone using the word buffer, please explain to that person what is buffer and what is float. There's a difference between float and buffer.
Yes, sir.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, Khyam, is it all right? Did I cover all of it?
Absolutely, sir.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, moving on. Whereas those for managing cost should be compatible with the financial practices, tools are required to identify trends and forecast future outcomes to determine whether reserves will remain sufficient. So whenever you feel the reserves are not going to be sufficient, as we just said, that you will see how much reserves have been consumed so far and how much is remaining, and is it sufficient for the remaining risks. If it is not, then you should move a change request and get more reserves allocated. And probably that is you are trying to get some money or time or resources out of the management reserve. So when you are requesting at this stage, you might be hoping for the management reserve to be released. Tools are also required for tracking progress and spending in a consolidated manner. Then tracking trigger conditions. Trigger conditions and the corresponding metrics are defined during the planned risk response process. So when we are creating the responses, we say we tell what are the sensors and what are the triggers. The trigger conditions are defined there. Tools are required to evaluate and track these conditions against the project baseline. Are specific thresholds based on actual status. They can be chosen to provide information on risks related to the deliverables, such as performance, as well as on project-related features such as time and cost. Tracking over at tools 9.3.3, tools are required in order to determine as the project progresses whether the responses are having the expected effect on the project's overall level of risk. So you must be holding a kind of a thermometer all the time and be ensuring that whatever we thought is happening accordingly and overall level of risk remains the same. If it doesn't, then probably you have to revise the risk thresholds and all that. Tracking compliance, in order to monitor the quality of the execution of the risk-related plans and processes, a set of quality metrics such as degree of variation from the baseline should be tracked and recorded. These metrics will normally have been defined in the risk management plan. Now, there are some techniques we'll just show you. Techniques for monitor and control risk are given in table D. So let's look at this is from the practice standard for risk management. Critical chain method I just explained to you. Use of buffer penetration to trigger action such as adjusting the relative priority of the task. So this is the strength of this technique. There are no weaknesses and critical success factor for effective application, there is none. Then reserve analysis. Reserve analysis is another technique. And what are the strengths? Provides a means of tracking spend and releasing contingency amounts as risks expire. Can be applied to schedule reserves in the same way. Releasing the contingency means what? If a risk does not occur, the reserves kept for that risk should be released, should go back to the organization. Gives early warning of need to communicate with sponsor. Weaknesses are could lead to unwarranted focus on cost dimension. Attention to overall measures of reserve depletion may hide detailed risk. And critical success factors for it is prior detailed reserve planning is done. Accurate sizing the contingency reserve of time or cost relative to the risk to overall project completion date and budget. As far as risk audits are concerned, the good thing about that is it provides a formal assessment of the compliance with the approach specified in the risk management plan. And the negative point is can be disruptive to the project and taken as too judgmental to the project team by the project team. And the critical success factors are well specified risk management plan and sensitivity to the burden it places on the project team. Risk reassessment, positive thing is forces a review of project risk when it becomes necessary so that the risk register remains up to date. And the negative is naturally going to take time and effort. And the critical success factor is well-maintained project and a risk documentation scheme. So this is the benefit you are ultimately going to get out of it. Status meetings, your progress meetings, they provide a means of verifying information about the status of risk, whether the risk is active or occurred or retired, and maintaining the team understanding. And the negative point is can seem unnecessary to some participants. Some participants think this is a useless effort, but that might not be true. And the critical success factor is good meeting preparations and discipline would be enforced. Trend analysis, it provides an indication of the effectiveness of earlier responses, can provide trigger conditions for the responses. The negative point is it requires understanding of significant and non-significant variations. And the critical success factor is regular reporting and analysis of the critical values. Then we have the variance analysis. Strengths are allows comparison between forecast and actual risk impact. That is exactly what it does. Can provide trigger conditions for response and can provide data for earned value analysis, which can be compared to quantitative risk analysis results. The weaknesses are it does not show the relationship with earlier data. So variance analysis is not related with other tools and therefore it is separate in that aspect. The value can be taken out of context. The critical success factor is realistic prior definition of thresholds for significant variance. So you can read through all of this and you can make up your own mind what these tools are and how do they apply. I think this is enough information. You might not have had this information earlier in PMBOK. It is not given in PMBOK. This much detail is given only in the practice standard for risk management. So reserve analysis, this is an analytical technique to determine the essential features and relationships of components in the project management plan to establish a reserve for schedule, duration, budget, cost estimate, or funds for a project. So you have the reserve built for each one of these things. Tracking the state of reserve through project execution will provide summary information as to the evolution of the status of the corresponding risks. This information can be useful when reporting up the organization to those responsible for several projects. In addition, once a corresponding risk occurs or ceases to occur, or ceases to be current, when it can no longer impact the project, the corresponding reserve need to be reviewed in order to assess whether it still provides the agreed level of confidence. Time buffers can be used in two different ways: to provide for accepted schedule risks as described above, or as scheduling related technique in critical chain project management. In contrast with the contingency reserves for identified risks, the buffers in CCPM provide a shared mechanism for accommodating the natural variability of the activity duration over a sequence or chain of activities. Tracking the rate at which each such buffer is used during project execution provides valuable information at a given point in time, so to the level of scheduled risk along that chain, and is used in critical chain project management for adopting the priority of our management focus for additional analysis and as necessary triggering further risk management activities. Probably you won't find this definition, this explanation in PMBOK. Then risk audits, each of the tools which I have shown you in the table, they are being described here. Risk audits are carried out in order to evaluate, are the risk management rules being carried out as specified? Are the risk management rules adequate for controlling the project? No templates are examples are presented, because if PMI starts presenting any kind of templates, probably people will start following it exactly. So they want that you should create your own templates for these things. As far as the risk assessment is concerned, we are actually reviewing our risk, and we are following the plan, do, check, and act cycle, PDCA cycle. So the objective of risk assessment is to ensure that the full risk management cycle is repeated as required to ensure effective control. So let us start from plan risk responses. So when we are planning the risk responses, we integrate that to the risk related actions into the project management plan. We have already talked about whatever responses we have built in, we have inducted them into the relevant project plan, like in schedule, cost, or wherever that has been inducted. So while we were actually executing them, implementing those responses, we apply the project plan, including the risk related actions. So those activities will get executed. And while we are checking what is happening, if no project events carry on with the existing plan, then monitor and control risk, right? And this is the check process. And ultimately, what is the action? That is, otherwise, reassess project risk by identifying new risks. So this cycle will continue until the project ends. So this is risk reassessment. As far as the status meetings or the progress meetings are concerned, risk can and should be on the agenda at all project reviews. Typically, the agenda items should cover the following. Number one, top priority risks at present. What are the current risks at this point in time? Are there any changes? Risks are trigger conditions that have so far occurred, and what is the status of the actions? What are the actions to be taken, and are they being taken? Risk responded to in the last period, and what was the effectiveness of action taken, and are there any additional actions required? Risk closed in the last period, what is the impact on the plans? Lessons to be added to the organizational process assets. So this is a practical approach from the status meetings we can get out of it. It is a very good way of physically visualizing what are we doing about risk. So every status meeting or progress meeting, if we keep doing this, we will be current about what is happening according to the risk. Then we have the trend analysis. The evolution of the variance value over time should be analyzed in order to evaluate how the risk profile is changing. So what is the trend taken by the risk analysis? How is the risk profile is changing? Was it before? Previously the risk it was a very risky profile, and now it is reducing or it is increasing. Whether previous actions are having the expected effect or not, and whether the additional actions are required. The earned value formulae of the two complete performance index can be used to assess changes with respect to time and cost. No template examples are presented. So, can you please update PI? Anyone? Two complete performance index? What do you understand?
So TCPI is actually tells you to how much would it cost you if what sort of pattern you need to follow to um, finish the project
Okay, and what do you
spending
compare?
pattern.
What do you compare?
So budget remaining, funds remaining divided by work remaining.
Hmm. Work remaining and cost remaining, right? So, work remaining divided by cost remaining is the formula for TCPI. TCPI is
Yes, sir.
work remaining by cost remaining. So, what is the work
Yes,
remaining
sir.
at any point in time? Total work is BAC, and
Minus
whatever
earned
has
value.
been done, what has been done?
Earned value minus EBC.
Okay, the work remaining earned value minus BAC minus earned value is my work remaining. And what is the cost remaining? Again, BAC minus what?
Actual cost.
Actual cost. So BAC minus EV divided by BAC minus AC will give me the TCPI. So work remaining by cost remaining, if they are both equal, I will get an answer of 1. That means that only that much work is left which is for which the funds are available. So this is I'm doing all right. I do not need to do more work or something like that. If the answer is less than 1, that means how does it come? The work remaining, the work remaining is more is less, and the cost remaining is more. Work remaining is less and the cost is more. That means I have more money available and the work is less. So this is the only index in which any value less than 1 is good and any value more than 1 is bad. So any answer which starts with a 0 point something is good for us because we have more money than what we can spend. So we are ultimately going to be saving on the money, maybe. If the TCPI is 1 point something, that is bad because that means that we have got less money and more work to do. So we have to economize, we have to work harder. So I have to manage my resources in a more, robust form, and only then this TCPI can be met. So TCPI at any point in the life of the project will indicate to me how much effort is to be put in the project. If the value is more than 1, I have to put in more effort. If value is equal to 1, no more effort. If value is less than 1, then I can relax. Then comes the variance analysis. Variance analysis is the formula we used in the earned value, like scheduled variance, cost variance, cost performance index, and scheduled performance index. They can be used to set threshold for action and to indicate when the risk process may be ineffective. Earned value management system use variance from plan as the basis of forecast or extrapolation, that is called the forecasting, to the cost at completion. Projections made using EVMS have been shown by experience to be reliable early in the project. For example, 20% into the execution. No templates or examples are presented. Now, I would say, yes.
आर्टिकल तो बड़े मशहूर हैं, दो के बता सकते हैं, ये ना बजाय ना।
Okay. So, I will just describe the variance, the whole thing once again. When whatever we are trying to monitor or control in in monitoring and control process group, no matter what knowledge area it is, we especially from the point of schedule and cost, what we do is we compare our baseline with the actual, and actual is the work performance data. So I compare it with the actual, and that gives me the variance. So schedule variance and cost variance comes into play. Then I can convert it into a ratio which is called cost performance index and schedule performance index, which is more more better presentation of the same thing, and that gives me a kind of a unified value, something like 1 and less than 1 or more than 1, whereas cost variance and schedule variance may be very large figures and they are not really indicative of what is happening. So SPI and CPI is what I have established, that at this establishes the variance at any moment. This index represents that moment. But what about the trend this SPI and CPI are creating? That is called trend analysis. That CPI for the previous cycle, this cycle, next cycle. So whatever cycles have passed, whatever progress reports have passed so far, say 5 months have passed, so I may have 5 CPIs or 5 SPIs. So how can they be interpreted? What is the trend being established out of them? Then, seeing the trend of last 5 months, what is my projected value? What is my expected value for the next month? What do you expect that if on this trend I keep walking, then where will I reach by the end of next month? That is my projection for the next month. But if I exceed, project this extension even further to the end of the project and try to forecast the future, forecast the time or cost, that would be my forecasting. So we go through the whole process of variance analysis, trend analysis, projections, and forecasting. Then we have come over to the documentation of the results. Naturally, the whole process is finishing here. So risk registers and risk reports will be updated, and ultimately they will be put into the organizational process assets. The final control action of risk monitoring and control is to record actual data for future use. This includes all of the relevant information relating to risk management from start to finish of the project, the definition of what this information must include, as well as the storage mechanism should have been previously specified in the risk management plan. So, risk management plan already defines, they should have defined how this is going to occur. The goal is to ensure that the significant risk management information is recorded to provide concrete data to the lessons learned process for inclusion in the lessons learned documentation, reports, or other communication vehicle. Typical information includes the following, like for each identified risk or type of risk, whether it occurred, and if so, when and how often. All relevant data should be recorded, like impact of that risk, effectiveness of detection or of its response, any unplanned additional action that were carried out. So whole history of that risk must be properly recorded for future guidance. Effectiveness of avoidance or exploitation actions, effectiveness of transfer and sharing actions, unexpected and undocumented risks which occurred and data about them, effectiveness of risk mitigation and enhancement actions, occurrence of accepted threats or opportunities. So this is a complete postmortem of whatever has happened. This is the final review report or the lessons learned recording, which includes all what we have actually achieved so far as far as the risk management is concerned. Then also consolidated information should be provided on the level of effort expended. Cost and benefits to the project of risk management activities should also be provided. This information will need to be archived and indexed in a manner that will facilitate retrieval for easy review during the project, at closure, and for future projects when the need arises. So this is the whole cycle of project risk management. I think control system I have already defined to you in the second chapter, but if you want to refer to it, Rita Malkahi has a certain portion on change control system which can be shared with you. So she says a collection of formal documented procedures, paperwork, tracking system, and approval levels for authorizing changes. This is the change control system. There can be a change control system for each knowledge area in project management scope, schedule, cost. So every management plan will have its own change control system. But for unification purposes, for integration purposes, we may have put all the change control systems into one document and we call it change management system. These systems are described in the management plan for each knowledge area. Every knowledge area will define the change management mechanism for each knowledge area. But if you want to get it out of there and put it together in one place, you may call it a change management plan, and are implemented in integrated change control as part of the overall effort to control change. The collected change control system may include a change control plan included in the project management plan outlining how changes will be managed. This is a centralized system. Creation of a change control board. What will be who will be included in the change control board, and what is the procedure for approval. Uh, Change control procedures, how and who will do it, performance statistics, the time system and time drawing, reports, what reports are going to come out of it, and any change forms, the change request form or all formats, they must be provided. The project scope management may add the following in order to control changes to scope, like specification reviews, like demonstrations, testings, and meeting to review scope to identify changes. Change control board, as again, according to Rita Malkai, why should the project manager always have to be the one to deny a change request? The project manager alone might not even have the knowledge or expertise to analyze a change request. So project manager is not authoritative as far as that is concerned. Project manager's role might be to facilitate a decision about a change, a recommendation or something like that. So he would be suggesting that in the change request rather than to make it himself. For these reasons, it might be wise to form a change control board. The board would have the responsibility to review change requests to determine if additional analysis is warranted. They also approve or reject project changes. The board may include the project manager, customer, expert, sponsor, and others. For the exam purposes, assume that all projects have change control boards. See the change control process and other areas of this book for roles and responsibilities of the change control board. So the good thing about these books are that Rita Malkai and other books, they actually explain certain concepts which are not that well explained in PMBOK or other standards. Process of making change. It says prevent the root cause of the change. I hope you understand. If you can prevent the root cause of the change will be prevented. Identify the change, create the change request, assess the change, look at the impact of the change, perform integrated change control, look for different options, change is approved or rejected, adjust the project management plan and baselines accordingly, notify the stakeholders affected by the change, and ultimately manage the project to the new project management plan. This is how what things are happening in change management plan. Nothing new. We are just revising and talking about what we already know, but it is good to have all of these points together at one place. Process of making changes. Now let's get into more tricks for handling questions about changes on the exam. The most important one is to make sure you understand the following process for handling changes in a more detailed form than the steps 1 to 4 listed above. Number one step is prevent the root cause of the change. We have already given you a list of all these things. Prevent the root cause of the list. So 1 to 4 are important for you. Prevent the root cause of the change, identify change, create change request, and assess the change. So prevent the root cause. The project manager should not just focus on managing changes, but proactively eliminate the need for changes. If there is no need for change, it should be eliminated. Identify change. Changes can come from the project manager as a result of measuring against performance measured on baseline, from the sponsor, management, customer, or from stakeholders. Project manager should actively be looking for changes from all these sources. Discovering a change earlier will decrease the impact of the change. So remember, I'm not talking about risk anymore. I'm just talking about change. And change is different than risk, right? Then create a change request. Changes can be made to the project scope, project management plan, or even the performance measurement baseline. Change request follows the 4-step process outlined in the previous section. Assess the change. Does the change fall within the project charter? If not, it should not be a change to your project. if that is beyond your project, therefore you should not be worried about it. You must escalate that thing to somewhere, but you are not responsible. But maybe an entirely different project, therefore do not get involved in that. Many project managers have never really thought about this. In the change beneficial Is the change beneficial for the project? Is it needed? If the answer to any of these questions is no, the change should not be approved. However, any change that already had a reserve created for it, a previously identified risk event, should be handled as part of the risk management. Look at the impact of the change. If it is a scope change, how will it affect the scope of the project? If it is a time change, how will it affect the schedule of the project? So look at it from the impact point of view. Then perform integrated change control. How will the change affect all other components of the? There is no triple constant anymore, so I would rather say the project objectives. And then look for options. Options include actions to decrease threat, further increase opportunities, compress schedule through crashing, fast tracking, changing how the work is performed, adjusting quality, cutting scope so that the effect of the change will be minimized. Be careful, it is not wise to decrease the impact of every change. So you cannot decrease the impact of every change. So as far as you can do that. In doing so, the project manager could decrease the overall probability of success on the project as a whole. Sometimes an additional 2 weeks worth of scope added to the project should receive a 2-week extension of time to the project if the work occurs on the critical path. Notice that I am assuming you know what critical path is, and I hope you all know that. Last but not the least is the change is approved and rejected. Have you noticed that all the recommended corrective actions, preventive actions, and requested changes feed into the integrated change control, but nowhere in the PMBOK guide does it describe who approves the changes. So PMBOK does not describe that, but basically this is the responsibility of the project board, which is also not really mentioned there in so many words. Anyways, ninth is adjust the project management plan and baseline. Approved changes need to be incorporated in the project baseline. Changes could affect other parts of the project management plan or affect the way the project manager will manage the project. So changes could be made to management plans, and I would also add here to the project documents also. Then notify the stakeholders affecting the change. How often do you remember to do this? This could be thought of as configuration management, a form of version control, or a way to make sure everyone is working off the same project management plan. Then lastly, manage the project to the new project management plan. The integrated change control process is listed in the monitoring and controlling process group, but it really occurs during all the project management processes. For example, various management plans are created in project planning. Integrated change control should be done during project planning to approve or reject requested changes to the planning portion of the management plan. So from anywhere the change request is coming, it has to go through integrated change control, and change request process is always happening. So, gentlemen, this brings me to the end of this course. I have covered all the material and almost consumed all the time of today as well. Any questions, if you have, you can ask now. Ji Janab.
See, I have a general question for PMBOK 6. They have, now it's called monitor risks. Previously, it used to be control.
Yeah.
Now, I was having a discussion with a friend yesterday, and he said they have downgraded the process because monitoring is not proactive. Monitoring is passive. And I was trying to tell him that, not all risks can be controlled. So this is why we have to monitor them. But he kept insisting that it's been downgraded because monitoring, as we know, is passive. You just look at what's happening and you don't try to change anything. So how do you see this?
I would rather, I'm inclined towards your view. You are saying the right thing, and I have my own view, and that is when you are the people who were writing the PMBOK 6th edition, they were of the view that anything which is dealing with the human interaction would be called a monitor, and anything which is dealing with things would be called a control. That is the other reason. That is the original reason. So it is, don't go by the word of monitor and control, that monitor is less likely and control is something more tying up. Control is something which can be exercised on things. And yes, you can be very restrictive about it, that this is a pencil and I'm picking up the pen. Pencil doesn't have a heart of its own. It doesn't have feelings and emotions. Therefore, you can control it. But as far as humans are concerned, you cannot control them. You have to monitor them. So even if his view is right that he is downgraded, so let it be downgraded, because we are dealing with people. We cannot, be so cruel that we are trying to control them like things, right? So that's why it is there. And secondly, the second reason is that it has been split up into two parts. The implement risk responses have been taken out of it, and that has been placed in execution. And now the role of this thing is only to monitor, right? So this is the reason.
Fine, sir. Thank you.
Most welcome. Ji Mohit, any point from your side?
Not sir. Thank you.
Okay, Shahid Saab, you had been so silent today.
Sir, listening throughout, trying to
Okay,
cope up,
very nice,
but
very nice.
it's okay. Yeah.
आर यू कंफर्टेबल विद इट? मुझे थोड़ा सा लग रहा है कि जैसे यू आर अ बिट ऑफ ऑन दैट। वो थोड़ा पहले आप बड़ा इंटरेस्ट लिया करते थे।
सर वो शुरू की चीजें थी ना, अब एडवांस चीजें हैं। ऑब्वियसली कुछ टर्म्स जो हैं वो आर नोन टू मी, most of the terms are not known to me. I mean, apparently with the heading, it felt that I know it, but when you go into details, I really don't know it. So
Okay,
it's a kind of a learning to me.
right,
Yeah,
right.
that's the reason.
Then that is really wonderful if you people are getting everything, and I am very confident you all of you three are really very good at whatever you are doing, and you probably will be able to pass the exam in the first instant. So start
Inshallah.
preparing for that. Look at all the lectures which I have delivered to you and all that, and from tomorrow onwards, what do you want to do? One option is we just finish this thing today, and that's it. And the second thing is we come up with other queries and questions, and we can spend a couple of days more, and we can talk about those things. And maybe we can do some questions, which I have already shared with you. I can flash some questions on the screen, and you can answer that, and we can then somehow kind of discuss those questions and find the answers of them. Is it all right with you people?
Sir, since we've not done questions, I think it would be a good idea. I would be open to solving questions with you and seeing what we are getting wrong.
Okay.
So I think that would be a good thing if we can do
Yes,
it.
exactly. That is the
For 1
best
week.
way to uncover the knowledge gaps as well.
Okay.
So means
Wonderful.
this has always been proven a good strategy for me at least. That
Mhm. So let us spend next few days on that, and when you're comfortable with that, we can close the course then. But so far, I have covered all the material.
Sure, sir. We can start the
All right,
questions
sir.
from tomorrow.
Wonderful, wonderful. So then let's call it a day if there are no more comments. I'm really very thankful to you for listening to the whole course, and I have been blabbering around. Maybe sometimes I may not be very convincing, but at the same time, I'm very thankful to you people that you have been encouraging me. And tomorrow onwards, we'll start off with the questions and queries. And now I should seal it off. Let's meet tomorrow. Thank you very much, and take care, please. Khuda Hafiz.
Thank you, sir.
thank you, sir.
Allah Hafiz.
Good night. Allah Hafiz.